and then slicing her and cutting her and stabbing her 30 times, and then driving the butcher knife through her chest. The conditions were so horrific that I felt I had no choice under the existent law.
Somebody in the right mind doesn't take a 12-inch butcher knife and stab somebody 33 times. What had happened that day was a crazy, crazy, senseless act, and that my faith was actually calling me to forgive.
An autopsy confirmed she was slashed repeatedly with a meat cleaver and some other small cutting device, perhaps a razor blade or box opener. Authorities say she was then beaten over the head with a large chunk of asphalt from this pile.
Who was once the youngest death row inmate in Indiana committed suicide today in Indianapolis. Paula Cooper was convicted of the murder of the 1985 death of 78-year-old Bible school teacher Ruth Pelkey inside her Gary home.
They were just teenage girls, some still in high school. But what they did led them to death row. This isn't just about crime. It's about choices and consequences. Virginia Christian was only 16 years old when everything went wrong. On March 18, 1912, she went home of her employer, Ida Belote, in Hampton, Virginia. She worked as a laundress for the wealthy widow and came to ask for wages she believed she was owed. But instead of paying her, Belote accused Virginia of stealing a skirt and a locket. The argument turned violent. Virginia hit Belote with a broom and forced a towel down her throat. 51-year-old Ida Belote died on her kitchen floor. Virginia panicked, grabbing $4 and a ring, and ran. Two of Belote's children discovered the body shortly after, and within 75 minutes after the killing, Virginia was arrested. She had no prior criminal record. In jail, without speaking to an attorney, she confessed to attacking Belote. However, she maintained that she acted in self-defense and had not meant to kill her. Her trail began on April 8, 1912, in Elizabeth City County Court. Lasting just one day, Virginia was a young black girl accused of killing a white woman in the Jim Crow South. The all-white, all-male jury took just 23 minutes to find her guilty. Even though she was only 17 and the killing wasn't planned, the judge sentenced her to death by electric chair. Petitions for clemency poured in, signed by thousands, including prominent white residents, all pleading for mercy. Even the judge who sentenced her asked the governor to spare her life. But Virginia Governor William Hodges Mann refused to intervene, insisting that age, gender, and race should have no bearing on the law's outcome. On the morning of August 16, 1912, Virginia Christian was awakened early inside the Virginia State Penitentiary in Richmond. She was given a final breakfast of rolls, eggs, and coffee. Her last words were, "I know that I am getting no more than I deserve. I am prepared to answer for my sins, and I believe that the Lord has forgiven me. I fear that Mrs. Belote may not have been Christian. I blame no one for my situation. I hope to meet Mrs. Belote in heaven. I thank all who have worked on my behalf." At 7:23 a.m., Virginia Christian was executed in the electric chair. She was 17 years and 1 day old. Paula Cooper was just 15 years old when she made a choice that would change her life forever. On May 14, 1985, Paula and three friends, Karen Corder, 16, April Beverly, 15, and Denise Thomas, 14, after drinking malt liquor and smoking marijuana, decided they needed money for more drugs. That's when they came up with a plan. Rob 78-year-old Ruth Pelkey, a sweet woman who had once taught some of them Sunday school. The girls showed up at Ruth's house pretending they wanted a Bible lesson. Ruth welcomed them in with kindness. As Ruth turned to get her Bible, Paula grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen. While the other girls looked for things to steal, Paula stabbed Ruth 33 times in the chest and stomach. The girls fled with just $10 from Ruth's purse and her Plymouth Reliant, which they used for a joyride before abandoning it in a nearby neighborhood. Paula and her accomplices were arrested within 2 days after other students reported hearing them brag about the murder. But Paula's story didn't begin with violence. She came from unimaginable pain. Her mother was an alcoholic and a prostitute. Paula had been sexually abused, left alone for days, and had tried to take her own life multiple times. all before she turned 15. Still, none of that stopped prosecutors from going after the harshest punishment. Even though she was just a child, Paula Cooper was sentenced to death at age 16. She became the youngest person on death row in the United States. The European Parliament condemned the sentence. Pope John Paul II personally asked for mercy, and over 2 million people signed petitions to save Paula's life. But the most surprising reaction came from Ruth's own grandson, Bill Pelkey. At first, he wanted Paula to be executed, but over time, he forgave her, even becoming one of her biggest supporters. In 1989, after years of appeals and international pressure, the Indiana Supreme Court overturned her death sentence. She was resentenced to 60 years in prison. In prison, Paula changed. She got her high school diploma, studied college courses, learned German, and helped tutor other inmates. She was trying to become someone new. After 28 years behind bars, Paula Cooper was released in 2013. She was 43, but freedom wasn't easy. Paula struggled to adjust to life outside. On May 26, 2015, just 2 years after getting out, she died by suicide. She was 45 years old. In one of her final letters, she wrote to her fiancé, "I have taken a life and never felt worthy." On January 12, 1995, 18-year-old Christa Pike made a decision that would haunt the world. She, her boyfriend, Tadaro Ship, and their friend Shadala Peterson lured another student, 19-year-old Colin Slemmer, to a secluded spot near the University of Tennessee campus in Knoxville. Christa believed that Colin was flirting with her boyfriend. Her friends later said it wasn't true. Christa had just become paranoid and obsessed. They told Colin they wanted to make peace, offered her marijuana, and asked her to hang out. But when they got to the isolated spot, everything changed. Christa and Tadaro attacked Colleen. For 30 minutes, they tortured her, cutting, beating, and carving a pentagram into her chest. Then, Christa picked up a chunk of asphalt and smashed Colleen's skull. She died there, alone and terrified. Then came something even more disturbing. Christa kept a piece of Colleen's skull as a souvenir. She showed it off at school, bragged about it. People were horrified. The group was arrested just 36 hours later. A logbook showed that all 4 students left together, but only 3 came back. Police found the skull fragment in Christa's jacket. She quickly confessed, but claimed they just wanted to scare Colleen, and things went too far. She was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. At her trial, prosecutors called her cold and sadistic. The defense said Christa had a tragic life, passed between relatives, abused, neglected, and exposed to drugs and violence from a young age. But the jury didn't care. On March 22, 1996, Christa was found guilty. Just 8 days later, she was sentenced to death. She was 20 years old, the youngest woman on death row in America at the time. Her life behind bars has been anything but quiet. In 2001, she tried to strangle another inmate with a shoelace and was convicted of attempted murder. In 2012, prison officials uncovered a plot to help her escape and kill a rival inmate, though Christa was never officially charged for it. Her execution has been delayed many times because of appeals and problems with Tennessee's lethal injection process. As of 2025, she's still alive and still one of the youngest women ever sentenced to die in modern U.S. history. June 15, 1990, Anaheim, California. 9-year-old Autumn Wallace was home alone, waiting for her mom and sister to get off work. It was normal summer afternoon until someone knocked on the door. That someone was 18-year-old Maria del Rosario Alfaro, known to most as Rosie. She was a friend of Autumn's older sister and had been in their home before. Rosie thought the house was empty. She wanted to steal something, anything, to sell for drug money. But when Autumn opened the door and let her in, Rosie didn't leave. Instead, she asked to use the bathroom. On the way there, she grabbed a kitchen knife. Then she tricked Autumn into coming with her. And inside that bathroom, Rosie stabbed the little girl over 50 times. When it was over, she ransacked the house and left with items worth just $240. It took only 4 days for police to find her. Witnesses had seen Rosie near the Wallace home, and stolen items tied her to the murder. During a taped interview, Rosie confessed, saying she was high on heroin and cocaine at the time of the killing. That was never confirmed by drug testing, but the damage was already done. Rosie Alfaro's life had been full of pain long before that day. She got addicted to drugs at just 13, started working as a prostitute at 14, had her first child at 15, and by 18, she had 4 children. She was living in survival mode, desperate, broken, and spiraling. At trial, prosecutors called her a cold-blooded killer. They described the horror of the crime, the number of stab wounds, and the way Autumn had tried to fight back. The defense argued Rosie was a victim of abuse and addiction, someone who had never been given a chance. But the jury didn't see it that way. On July 14, 1992, Rosie Alfaro was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. She was just 20 years old, the first woman ever sentenced to the gas chamber in California, and at the time, only the 3rd woman on death row in the state. As of today, she's still behind bars, still waiting. On February 15, 2009, a twisted love triangle turned deadly in Madison County, Florida. 26-year-old Amelia Carr was 8 months pregnant. She was caught in a toxic relationship with her ex-boyfriend Joshua Fulgham, a man who was also the estranged husband of another woman, Heather Strong. There had been arguments over child custody, cheating, and control, but what started as drama between exes turned into a cold-blooded plan. That night, Joshua told Heather to meet him at a storage trailer on Amelia's family property. He said they needed to sign some custody papers. Heather had no idea it was a trap. Once she was inside, Amelia and Joshua tied her to a chair with duct tape. Then, according to court records, they argued over how to kill her. Amelia held Heather down, while Joshua suffocated her with a plastic bag. Afterward, they left her body in the trailer. Days later, they moved it to a shallow grave in the Ocala National Forest. For weeks, they pretended Heather had just run away, but her family knew something was wrong, and soon, investigators did too. Detectives spotted cracks in Joshua's story. Physical evidence linked both him and Amelia to the murder. At first, Amelia denied it, but under pressure, she confessed, admitting she had helped restrain Heather and watched her die. She said she was manipulated by Joshua, but it was too late. Amelia Carr was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Prosecutors said she was jealous and wanted Heather gone. The defense told a different story, that Amelia had been abused all her life, had mental health struggles, and fell under the control of a violent man. But the jury didn't buy it. In December 2010, Amelia was found guilty, and on February 22, 2011, she was sentenced to death, becoming the first woman in Marion County ever sent to death row. Years later, Florida law changed. The courts ruled that death sentences must be unanimous, and in Amelia's case, the jury had voted 7-5. So, on November 15, 2018, her death sentence was overturned. She was resentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. In court, she gave a tearful apology. "I was young and stupid and let a man control me. I participated in taking a mother from her children, and I have to live with that every day. Heather didn't deserve what happened. I'm sorry to her family, and especially to her kids." Today, Amelia Carr is still serving life at Lowell Correctional Institution. She is now 40 years old. On July 8, 2005, one of the most chilling double murders in Florida's history took place, and it started with a woman the victims trusted. Tiffany Cole was 23 years old. Years earlier, an elderly couple, Reggie and Carol Sumner, had sold her a used car. They were kind to her, friendly, almost like family. But when Tiffany found out they had sold their home and moved to Jacksonville with some extra cash in the bank, everything changed. She and her boyfriend Michael Jackson began plotting. Along with two other friends, Alan Wade and Bruce Nixon, they planned a robbery and murder. Using her past connection, Tiffany visited the Sumners several times, pretending to catch up. In reality, she was scoping out their routines, their valuables, and even getting personal info like bank details. Then, on the night of July 8th, the group stormed into the couple's home. They tied Reggie and Carol up with duct tape and demanded their ATM PINs and passwords. But this wasn't just about money. The group had already dug 2 graves. From the beginning, they planned to leave no witnesses. They shoved the terrified couple into the trunk of their own car and drove to a remote part of Georgia. Still alive, Reggie and Carol Sumner, both in their 60s, were lowered into those shallow graves, bound, gagged, and completely helpless. Michael Jackson and Alan Wade began to bury them alive. Tiffany and Bruce Nixon stayed back by the road. After the murders, Tiffany pawned off the couple's jewelry and helped spend more than $1,000 from their stolen ATM card. But it didn't take long for investigators to track the group down. Police found 3 of them in a hotel in South Carolina, and when Bruce Nixon was arrested, he led detectives straight to the Sumners' graves. Tiffany Cole was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, plus robbery and kidnapping. At her trial, prosecutors said she knew what was going to happen and took part anyway. They called it betrayal of the worst kind. The defense told a different story, that Tiffany had been emotionally abused, manipulated by her boyfriend, and didn't know the couple would be killed. But her own words and the witness testimony told another story. On October 19th, 2007, Tiffany was found guilty. The jury voted 9-3 in favor of the death penalty, and on March 6th, 2008, she was sentenced to die. Over the years, her attorneys argued that her sentence was too harsh, especially since she didn't physically kill the couple. But that didn't matter, not until the law changed. In 2023, nearly 18 years later, the Florida Supreme Court overturned her death sentence. A new rule declared that jury votes for death must be unanimous, and hers wasn't. Tiffany Cole was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Today, she's 43 years old and serving her time at Lowell Correctional Institution. They were young, some barely adults, but the crimes they committed or took part in were irreversible. Lives were lost, families shattered, and justice in all its forms was served. What are your thoughts? Do they all deserve to die? And remember to subscribe for more cases that matter.